That comes as a new independent report from Israel says Hamas and its allies committed systematic and widespread sexual violence during the October 7th, 2023 attack on Israel and on hostages who were taken back to Gaza. And on Monday, Israel's parliament passed a law establishing a military tribunal to try hundreds of Palestinian militants who took part in the attack, a step lawmakers said would help heal national trauma. Well, for the latest on all of this, let's bring in our Jerusalem correspondent, Noga Tarnopolsky. Noga, first of all, start with this independent Israeli report about the sexual violence. Who was in charge of this report, and what exactly did they find?
The woman who is the chairperson of this report is a forensic attorney called Kochav El Kayam Levy, who is rather well known in the field. But she headed a large team of more than 20 experts, all of them volunteers who have worked for more than 2 years to compile what is, at this point, the most serious forensic examination of what actually happened in terms of sexual violence, but in general violence on October 7th, 2023, and in the period, the subsequent period, meaning they contend, based on more than 10,000 pieces of documentary evidence, that the sexual violence was an integral part of Hamas's plan for the invasion of Israel. They call it gender-based violence, but it's important to emphasize it's not directed women. Cases, it was directed against entire families. One case, a really horrific case that is outlined, is when family members were forced to commit acts of sexual violence against one another for Hamas cameras. But there are numerous cases. Now, this kind of information has trickled out over the last 2 years. There was a very minor Israeli initial investigation, a police investigation. There was also a UN investigation, you may recall, but these were not taken seriously in terms of legal documentation. This is by far the most widely encompassing investigation, and it comes after Israelis have already heard, Israelis and others, I would say drips and drops of testimony from freed hostages, those who survived, both about sexual crimes that they witnessed while they were held hostage, and some committed against them, again, both men and women. But this is under a general, I would say, umbrella context, and that includes the law that you also mentioned, in which the Israeli government is basically contending with the fact that it has blocked any and all investigations into what happened on October 7th. And as the 3-year mark of that date approaches, and the families of the victims in particular are getting more and more desperate in the fear that documentation will vanish before any real investigation takes place, what we're seeing is this investigation by a volunteer group of experts. And as you mentioned, this law that was passed by the Knesset, an effort by the government to show that, in fact, it is paying attention to those crimes committed on October 7th.
Noga, obviously, you're mentioning this law that was this rare moment of cross-party cooperation. Just tell us a bit more about this.
Yes, it was a rare moment of cross-party cooperation, and it's also a moment, to be honest with you, Jeannie, of PR, I would say. There are very few Hamas operatives who invaded Israel on October 7th held in Israeli facilities. There are a little more than 1,000. And they have not yet been put on trial 2.5 years later for no real reason. The military law does exist in Israel to try them. Most of the Hamas operatives who are known and who invaded Israel on that day were killed during the course of the war. And this law, which doesn't offer anything really new beyond the military law that already exists, is part of the government's effort to show the government and the opposition that they are trying to bring some measure of justice to the victims.